Cooper Kupp previously starred at Eastern Washington. Could he be making a Pacific Northwest homecoming with the Seattle Seahawks? We're going to take a deep dive here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our Blue Friday episode by my co-host, Nick Lee, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in Snohomish, Washington, or across the country in Dover, Delaware. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for listening in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are now officially into phase 2, maybe even phase 3 of free agency. A lot of the marquee players are off the board, but that doesn't mean that there are not some intriguing players that are still available. The Seahawks linked to a couple of them today, most notably the noise with Cooper Kupp. It's not going away. The potential for Kupp to return to the state of Washington and stay within the NFC West after being released by the Rams. We'll be diving into that possibility. And then we're going to debate 5 free agent fits, 5 positions with 2 different players, which one would be the best fit for the Seahawks to sign heading into the next phase of free agency. And we're going to grade the signings that have been made so far, including the re-signings of Ernest Jones and Jarran Reed. Jam-packed episode coming your way, so let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. For what feels like a millennium, Cooper Kupp has been torturing the Seattle Seahawks as a member of the Los Angeles Rams, and that made it especially difficult for fans in the Pacific Northwest because Cooper Kupp is from the state of Washington. He played at Eastern Washington University. So it was always difficult to hold a grudge against Kupp, but the fact that he was doing all this damage in a Rams uniform had to be really difficult for Seahawk fans to stomach. Now there's a possibility, however, with Kupp being released earlier this week by the Rams in a cap-cutting move, that he could be coming home to the Pacific Northwest, continuing to see various reports out there that the Seahawks very much are involved in the mix trying to sign Cooper Kupp. This latest update coming from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. Seattle has attempted to sell Kupp on a vision for his next NFL chapter, and Kupp has been in touch with members of the organization. That's about as straightforward as it can get. The Seahawks clearly have been trying to push an idea for what Kupp's next stage could look like in Klint Kubiak's offense, getting to come back home with his family. He's been investigating it, talking to members of the organization. A couple other teams have been linked out there. The Dallas Cowboys being the one, I have no dang clue if they're actually involved or not, because there's been like 50 different reports of conflicting status on that front. But the Seahawks have been a consistent presence here in this discussion about Cooper Kupp, who is not the player that he was when he got the Triple Crown several years back. He's not the same player going on 31 years of age. But, Nick, I think you can push back against the idea that this guy does not offer value, because if you watch the games last year, certainly the end of the season was not as good for him, but when he's been healthy, he has still been a pretty productive receiver. He had better numbers than Tyler Lockett had last year in several games fewer for the Rams.
Yeah, if you look at like a fantasy standpoint, Cooper Kupp still had a fairly solid year. I believe 7 of his first 9 games of 2024, I think I read it was like 15 or more fantasy points. So he was certainly on a good trajectory there. Obviously, at this point of his career, it's is he, how healthy is he? How much does he have left in the tank as far as, you know, the 17 plus game grind of the NFL season? Of course, born and raised in Yakima. Shout out to the Palm Springs of Washington, as what Yakima has on their sign there. I love Yakima. Go out there for work sometimes. Obviously, a standout here locally, EWU. So, yeah, it's going to be hard to really beat the 2021 run he had with the Super Bowl champion Rams. Being basically the Miguel Cabrera of the NFL with the Triple Crown, and it's tough to view him in that same light, because yes, it's been a few years since he's had those just eye-popping receiving numbers as far as the whole season goes, because it's really been hard for him to put a full season together. So really, it's not a matter of, you know, how productive can he be, it's how healthy can he be, because he can still do it. And then I saw another report that I think it's from Ian Rappaport that he was looking perhaps between 12 to 15 million per year for what the Seahawks have in the cap space with all the signings going down the pipe, maybe 20, 25 million or so in cap space. That would be, maybe half or maybe slightly over half of the remaining cap space going to an aging receiver. When you already got MVS in the building, you got JSN in the building. Talk about all the acronyms for receivers. Adding another guy that could be double-digit plus AAV to the cap would be a little rough. I think if you can find a way to get that down, especially I know the hometown discount is kind of a kind of a thing that's thrown around a lot that doesn't happen a lot. Naturally, in this stage of his career, coming back home to Washington was always, I think, on the table. Just it was a natural fit. Players do that a lot where they're kind of in the twilight, or maybe not the twilight, but certainly the sunset, or the sun's getting low in the career of Cooper Kupp. It made a lot of sense to bring him perhaps closer to home, although LA's not that far. But I do wonder about the fit with you already got MVS and JSN. Klint Kubiak already doesn't throw out 3-4 wide receiver sets very much. And throwing him out there with a fairly decent cap hit, maybe you can figure out a way to get those incentive-laden deals where that the AAV or the cap hit isn't as bad. But I do wonder if the Seahawks really truly need Cooper Kupp this year. Obviously, it'd be way fun for headlines, for all the stories and everything. So much fun. I do think he has some left in the tank, but just with you already signed Marcus Valdes-Scantling. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba, two solid receivers. And you just got out of a big payday with DK Metcalf. You got out from under hope to reallocate funds elsewhere. It'd be kind of a bummer to just go right back there and pay a big number for an aging receiver. But if the price point is right, heck yeah, that'd be way fun.
Yeah, I'm going to push back at the idea that the fit isn't necessarily there. And I was talking about this on social media today. To me, if you can get it to where it's a $12 to $13 million per year deal, and a good chunk of that is incentives, as you mentioned, and you're able to get that cap hit to where it's not above $8 or $9 million, I think he is an excellent fit in this offense. And look, he is not a separator, and that's never really been his game. That's kind of what I've been laughing about this week. People are like, he can't separate. And it's like, that's never been Cooper Kupp's game. He's never been a guy that wins a bunch of routes downfield because he's a separator. He's an excellent route runner. He understands what the defense is doing, and he finds holes in the defense. He's really good at running those intermediate crossing routes. That has not changed. The injuries have certainly been an issue, and I think that's why an incentive-laden contract has to be the way that you go here. It can't just be, here's $14 million this year that's all guaranteed. Like, you can't do that with what we've seen injury-wise. But I look at what the Seahawks have at receiver now. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, is much more versatile than just being a slot. And in this offense, where they're going to have a lot of two receiver sets, he's going to be playing boundary quite a bit anyway. And then you look at Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's a one-trick pony. He's very good at that one trick, but he is there to run off safeties, go vertical, and sprint around the field and try to draw guys so you can get Jackson Smith and Jigba open. They need that receiver on the backside that can give the dagger with dig routes. And who is one of the very best in the NFL at doing that? It is Cooper Kupp. He's played in an offense that isn't identical to this one. Sean McVay comes more from the 11 personnel side of things in the Shanahan tree, but still, he worked under Mike Shanahan. And we know, obviously, the other coach here, the Kubiaks, they come from that Shanahan tree as well. They are more of the traditional under center. Let's get back to tight end set. So there's some differences there, but there's a lot of similarities in the type of routes that you're going to be running with these players. And if you look historically, Klint Kubiak's done a good job of adapting his offense to different style receivers. He's had Justin Jefferson before, went off for 1,600 yards, featured him. This past season in New Orleans, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed were having really good years, and then they both got hurt. And they signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and he has 4 touchdowns in his first 4 games. And they changed up how they were getting the ball to their receivers to fit him. So, look, I think that the fit is here. To me, it all boils down to the money, as you mentioned. I think if you can get that incentive-laden deal where there is that carrot out in front where you can make $13, $14 million this year, that's a huge win for the Seahawks if he earns that money. but I think it has to be that way. It can't be a heavily guaranteed contract at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like if Kubiak is saying, here's the type of receiver I want for my offense. A lot of those traits and features Cooper Kupp has. You're right. And just the kind of the receiver I've always admired, just because I'm not going to say sneaky athletic. I'm not going to go that route. But he's one of those receivers where not an inch of his height is wasted, not a pound of his weight is wasted. Everything, he just gets the most out of it, and is just so cerebral. And you could always use a guy like that on your team and in your offense. And, adding another dimension perhaps would be great. But again, yeah, it comes down to the price point. That the storylines would write themselves. Of course, him coming home. I was just at Eastern the other day, or a couple of months ago, and they still very much are very proud of their Super Bowl MVP receiver over there, as they should be. But yeah, I do. There definitely needs to be a threshold of a price point, because with the Seahawks, with the moves they've made and some of the moves they haven't made yet, this is something that would be a nice cherry on top, more so than the actual cake.
And I will say this, look, we read the comments because we appreciate our listeners. Look, Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith-Njigba are not the same receiver. I've seen a lot of that talk this week. They are not. I think JSN has more vertical capabilities than Cooper Kupp.
That's selling JSN short too.
Yeah, I think you're selling him short there, and I think he's a guy that can do damage on the outside. We saw it when Metcalf was out a few games last year, that he's more than capable. Cooper Kupp, to me, is that more traditional backside, can play in the slot, can do stuff on the outside, but he is not the same type of receiver. There's some similarities to their game, but there's not a lot of overlap. It's not a major redundancy thing. I wanted to finish off with that. When we come back, look, the Seahawks, as Nick just mentioned, there's some moves they haven't made. We're going to be talking about free agent fits, 5 different positions, 2 players at each spot. We're going to be discussing and debating who the Seahawks should be trying to make a move for as they go into the next phase of free agency. Don't go away. You're listening to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting underway, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking Zach Edey to have 5 blocked shots, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. As we just dove into the Cooper Kupp storyline, the homecoming storyline, that has been the most prominent storyline with the Seahawks the last 2 days. Though I don't know that it should necessarily be, because we've talked about the offensive line the last 4 or 5 days, not being able to get Will Fries, the inability to go out and get an impact player in the interior of the offensive line. That might be changing, however, and this goes with a report that our good friend James Rapine from Bengals on SI dished out early this week. I had mentioned this as a possibility before free agency started, but Tevin Jenkins from the Chicago Bears, he is going to be visiting the Seahawks for a free agent meeting on Monday. And certainly Jenkins comes with some injury baggage. There's no question about it. That's the reason he's still available. That's the reason the Seahawks are bringing him in. And I'm sure the physical is a big part of that process for the Seahawks. But, Nick, when we're looking at the guards remaining on the market, I think you can make a very strong argument. It depends on scheme, obviously, but you can make an argument that Tevin Jenkins in Klint Kubiak's system is the most talented guard that is left, that's available and has upside. And then, of course, you've got Mekhi Becton from the Philadelphia Eagles turned his career around in Philadelphia. Might not be as good of a scheme fit, but he's a couple years younger. He's coming off a big season in Philly, helping them get to a Super Bowl. So that's going to be our first discussion point here. Best fit as far as a free agent guard for the Seahawks to sign. Is it Jenkins, who we know the Seahawks have interest in, or Becton, a player that has not really been linked to the Seahawks, but still remains available?
Well, I'm going to kind of cheat here. Best fit, I agree, is probably Jenkins. Who do I want? Mekhi Becton. I got a little insider knowledge. Been hearing it from my brothers and my dad about him as an Eagle. One of the more underrated feel-good stories of the 2024 NFL season was Mekhi Becton kind of reinventing himself in the interior for the Eagles and really becoming a road grader. They loved him. They hate to lose him in Philly. So as far as fit, Jenkins might be that guy, and he's probably better at pass pro, just looking at some of the stuff. But as far as Becton, I mean, of course, he's got the first round talent. Kind of failed out as a first round tackle for the Jets. But as a road grader, if you want a guy that can just bully people just in the ground game, even though it might not be the most schematically congruent fit, just a guy who loves to bowl over the guy in front of him. Mekhi Becton had a heck of a season, a whale of a season for Philadelphia. And just if you're trying to establish the run game and get more of that physicality in the interior, I love me some Mekhi Becton.
I like both of these players. I think if you turned on Bears tape, and I've seen some fans mention this, why would we want a lineman from the Bears when they just completely retooled their interior offensive line? I understand that argument, but Jenkins, the big issue has just been availability. When he's been healthy, he's played well. Last year, he had a 72 run blocking grade on zone concepts. He's had at least a 71 grade each of the last 3 years as a run blocker, and it matches the tape. There's physicality to his game. He moves well as a former tackle. He at least moves well at the guard position. So I think that certainly can understand Seattle from that perspective. But I'm going to agree with you that I think Becton is I think Becton's the better player of the two. And I don't see the scheme fit issue as much. Look, Becton is really athletic for 360 plus pounds. He can move. He can move people off the line of scrimmage. And it's easier to be a zone blocker when you're the width of multiple zones. Let's be honest. It makes it easier to do your job. So I think they should very much be in the running for both these guys. They should have been active for both of them and hope you can get one. And maybe they are behind the scenes. But Becton is the guy that it's just been really quiet with. And I just think he's a really good player that just needed out of New York. I mean, you just signed Sam Darnold. You had Geno Smith before. Like, the Seahawks have been a safe haven for Jets rejects and having them really turn their careers around. Becton obviously did that in Philly, but why not keep that going in Seattle? So I think both these guys make sense. Let's go to nose tackle real quick, Nick. Best fits, bringing back Jonathan Hankins. Obviously, we know his relationship with Aden Durde, or a Rob Rang special here. I don't know that there was a player he talked about in the pre-draft process a few years back more than Leki Fotu, previously of the Arizona Cardinals, a younger player. They certainly still need a nose tackle. They don't have that 330-plus pound guy with Hankins being a free agent. What direction would you go here?
Oh, boy. Unfortunately, both guys, if you look at their Pro Football Focus page, they're in the red for a lot of it. Hankins had a few moments in Seattle, fairly, thankless, unspectacular role in the defense. Fotu also has struggled a little bit along the interior as far as just the grades, not particularly the, pass rushing guy. I mean, obviously a nose tackle, they have different roles, but I like the Hankins reunion there, just a bit more as far as fit and just bringing back a guy who's familiar with it. Yeah, I don't have I'm not going to pretend like I know a crazy more than Rob Rang, of course, about Fotu for sure. But I'm going to probably side on familiarity in this one with Hankins.
Age to me is not as important when we're looking at nose tackles because they don't play as many snaps. And Hankins, look, I understand PFF grades, but I thought there were some games he played really well last year. There were some that he disappeared a little bit. I would rather have that familiarity too, and I think you can get him at a pretty cheap price point. So Hankins would be my pick there. Now, this next one is going to create an interesting debate here. Let's talk fullbacks. And it's going to be easy for our listeners to say, well, this should be a no-doubter. Kyle Juszczyk perennial All-Pro, perennial Pro Bowler. He is the modern fullback with his pass-catching ability. He can run the ball. He can block. You can move him around the formation. I don't think it's as easy, though, in this case, just saying Kyle Juszczyk, that's got to be the guy. When Adam Prentice was a big part of the fact the Saints actually had a respectable run game last year, and he's more of the traditional fullback that kind of fits in with Kubiak's scheme. We know that they'd love to have Juszczyk, but I think you can make an argument in terms of value, and I'm saying this again. I'm not saying Adam Prentice is as good as Juszczyk because he's not, but you talked about the salary cap space. To me, Adam Prentice, you're going to get special teams from him. Juszczyk isn't playing special teams at this stage in his career. Those are some things you have to consider here in terms of bang a buck when you're talking about the fullback position. So as much as I'd love Juszczyk, we know Prentice can play in this system. He did it last year, and he's a younger player. It would really boil down to price point, and I have a feeling Juszczyk might fetch more from another team.
I'm going to go see Taysom Hill. No, I'm just kidding. He's still a Saint last time I checked. But
what's funny is I knew you were going to do that. So,
but for me, I'm going to go guts here. I'm not going to cite any Pro Football Focus, anything, nothing about stats. I'm going to go in pure vibes. Forcing 49er fans to watch Kyle Juszczyk in a Seahawks uniform would just be hilarious. Like, that would just be all vibes. Just I get you make some great points about Prentice. I think he's probably the shrewd option, the savvy option here. But just strictly going on the two fan bases battling, social media, watching
getting a sports car at fullback. I mean, absolutely. It excites me. Don't get me wrong.
Kyle Juszczyk for vibes only.
All right, let's go to the cornerback position, which is an underrated need depth-wise. I know that you are going to go one direction here that I'm very curious to hear your insight on, but Mike Hilton, formerly of the Bengals, or Asante Samuel Jr., formerly a first-round pick for the Chargers, both these guys remain available.
Yeah, I know Hilton's more of the slot type, and Samuel has more boundary experience, and the Seahawks do have, of course, Devin Witherspoon, who's fairly good at the slot position, but you also want him to be able to bounce around. So if I were to sign Mike Hilton, that would, in my mind, free up Devin Witherspoon a little bit more, where if you go another boundary corner, what I don't want to do is put Devin Witherspoon in a silo. I want him just bouncing around wherever he's the most successful. And if signing Mike Hilton helps that, great. I'm not asking either of these guys really to be, the featured corner opposite of Woolen perhaps. But what I do like is Hilton also is a much better run defender than Samuel. At least everything I've seen statistic wise. So I'm going to opt for
mouth, sir.
Yeah. So I'm going to opt for the run defender prowess in Hilton, and perhaps giving another slot option so Devin Witherspoon can move around. So give me Hilton.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there because, when we went into this conversation, I thought Samuel, former first-round pick, obviously has ball skills. There's some concerns. Is Woolen going to be back after this next year? Job's going to be a free agent next year. Is Job going to play as well as he did last season this year? There's a lot of questions there. But I'd rather have Devin Witherspoon be able to play outside some and then mix him inside. And you can do more of that with Mike Hilton. And quite frankly, I just think Mike Hilton is a more well-rounded player than Asante Samuel. And he's not coming off an injury like Asante Samuel is. If it's a buy low situation, Samuel makes sense. But Hilton is a underrated player that I think would make a lot of sense. And I think his blitzing ability, Mike McDonald will get really excited about that. You know that. Last one real quick. Neither one of these guys is a free agent yet, but they're expected to be free agent centers, Garrett Bradbury or David Andrews. And obviously Bradbury, Nick, has the distinction of being the one that snapped to Sam Darnold in Minnesota last year. David Andrews is a player the Seahawks had some interest in a few years ago when he was a free agent. So kind of an interesting dynamic here with two players who have played in similar systems to the one that we are going to be seeing with Klint Kubiak.
This is one of those where I really be pretty happy with either. Both talk about grown adults in the room. Both of them are a definition of that at center. You got Andrews, 8-time team captain, and Bradbury, just the spearhead of a very, very good offensive line in Minnesota, familiarity with Sam Darnold. There is something to be desired with Bradbury's pass blocking, at least last year. 4 sacks allowed, 48.2 pass blocking grade, not great. But just the type of football that the Seahawks, I think, want to play under McDonald and Kubiak, with the familiarity of Sam Darnold, which I think is Sam Darnold. You want to make as comfortable as possible. I think that's kind of the goal for Seattle. At least I hope that's one of their goals. I would like to see Bradbury just for that. And also he would be just instantly right now your best interior offensive lineman.
Yeah, and I think he's just a more athletic, a little bit younger option that fits better with the run game that they want. He's obviously played in Kevin O'Connell's system, and he played for Kubiak previously in Minnesota. So there's already that link. The pass protection stuff worries me a little bit, but maybe Kubiak can get him back to where he was earlier in his career with John Benton and this coaching staff. Rick Dennison coached him in Minnesota. To me, it's not a knock on David Andrews. I just don't know that the scheme fit is as good as it would be. And he obviously doesn't have the built-in relationship with Sam Darnold. When we come back, we are going to switch gears to the deals that have happened. And Nick, you and I are going to put on our report card hats. It's time to grade out all 6 signings, the significant ones. We could obviously talk about Cody White and some of those other ones, but the significant signings the Seahawks have made so far with their own players and outside free agents. We'll get to that up next here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. The pizza delivery guys, they all know me by name. That's probably a problem. I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. This entire show has been themed off the moves Seattle could or should make. Let's talk about the moves that Seattle already has made. And there's been some activity, maybe not at the one position group that fans have really been wanting a player to be signed at, but there has been some movement. So, Nick, you and I are going to put on our grade card hats, and we're going to be dishing out letter grades here for each of the 6 significant deals that the Seahawks have made so far. And look, we got to start off with the biggest move that has been made, the one that some people might be questioning a little bit whether it was the right move or not. But let's talk about Sam Darnold and that 3-year, $100.5 million contract.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that moves the needle the most. Certainly when the news broke, certainly of the Geno Smith trade, but then of the Sam Darnold signing, I had multiple hands scratching my head, 3, 4 hands. But the more I kind of let it marinate, if he's nothing really more than a similar Geno Smith played, and he's younger and cheaper than Geno probably will be after an extension. I'm honestly okay with this. Strictly by AAV standards, Darnold would be the 17th highest paid quarterback right now with the current deals. I know there's going to be some jumbling of some deals with quarterbacks down the line, but right now 17th. If the Seahawks are employing Darnold as the 17th highest paid quarterback, I'm okay with that. Familiarity, of course, with Kubiak, and coming off the best season of his career, of course. The multiple $100 million question really is, was Sam Darnold's season last year a Kevin O'Connell accomplishment, or was it a Sam Darnold accomplishment? Obviously, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, because it usually always is. So I'm going to grade this a bit on a curve for me, because existing only in a world where the Seahawks, which was the world they existed in, where they had to move off Geno Smith, had to sign a quarterback to replace him. So in that little window of where they had to replace Geno Smith with a quarterback that was realistically available, I'm going to give this a B. I think similar I'm not saying I'm going to be a lateral move, but certainly younger, cheaper, maybe a bit more high upside in the next year or two. I'm going to give us a solid B. Not crazy exciting. That there's still some people that are going to roll their eyes at Sam Darnold. They've certainly, which is there's understandable questions about Sam Darnold, but I'll give it a B based on what the Seahawks were facing.
Yeah, I actually am going to give a B as well here, and it boils down to, look, I know all the reports that are out there. I'm basing this off of what I have been told, which is that the Seahawks were in that $35 million per year window with Geno Smith. There's been reports that they offered 40 to 45. I have not heard that. Now, maybe those other reports, actually, that's what ended up happening. There's all kinds of different storylines that go out there in negotiations between two different sides. But if you were paying Geno Smith $45 million a year versus Sam Darnold making $33 to $35 million per year, yes, that's a significant savings. And you also are getting younger, 7 years younger. You get a guy that had better numbers than Geno Smith last year. I can't give it better than a B, though, because of some of those reservations that you mentioned with the offense for Kevin O'Connell. There's going to be some differences here. He doesn't have DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett to throw to. Are you going to be able to rebuild that arsenal of weapons? Are you going to get a better tight end to pair with Barner and maybe Noah Fant if he's still here? I would think they'd moved on from Fant if they were going to do that. But there's enough question marks there for me. And the fact that, again, this is like Geno Smith when he got his first contract. Like, are we going to get similar production? And his numbers did go down some. Are we going to see some regression, especially with this offensive line? I mean, there's a lot of question marks here. So I think in terms of value and what you had last year with Sam Darnold, I'm giving a B. Our next one, let's go to the defense. DeMarcus Lawrence, 3 years, up to $42 million. Let's make sure we emphasize that. $18 million in guarantees for a guy that's been a multi-time Pro Bowler, has been on a couple of all-pro teams, and up until his injury last year was still playing pretty darn well.
Well, if you just look at the online banter between him and Micah Parsons and the comments of Cowboys fans super angry about this and maybe some ruffled feathers leaving, I'm going to give us an A just from that point of view. And like I said, I've been calling for more grown adults in the room, and DeMarcus Lawrence absolutely falls in that category. And even if you kind of round out, I know it's not the perfect science, but the 10.8 AAV with the deal, I know that's not quite what it's going to be, but still very, very reasonable number, I think, for a guy that's, just even, I know last year was a bit of an up and down injuries and stuff like that, but 2023, he was the 8th graded pass rusher, or 8th graded edge rusher in 2023. He was a top 10 edge rusher in the NFL just 2 seasons ago. So if you get him a healthy offseason, hopefully, and get him in the system, get him comfortable in Seattle, seems like he's really happy to be here based on the comments, and maybe more happy to leave Dallas. I don't know. I'm going to give us an A. I'm really like it's instant name recognition, and kind of, I don't know if you can call this a splash signing, but pretty darn close.
Yeah, I'm going to go with an A- on this one. I'm not going to go an A just because he is coming off the injury and he's going to be 33 next month. So I don't view it as like a perfect signing, but it's close because I look at him as a Jadeveon Clowney type player in Mike McDonald's scheme. And we saw what Clowney did a couple of years ago in Baltimore and how he just magnified that defense under Mike McDonald. I think DeMarcus Lawrence can have that kind of an impact. I think he's still a really good pass rusher, doesn't get the sacks maybe as much, but he had 3 and 4 games before he got hurt last year. He's still more than capable. He's been a highly regarded run defender his entire career. He is hard-nosed, so I love the addition. I just, it makes a strength even stronger, and I'm all on board for that in the NFC West. Let's go to the offensive line because there has been a signing made. Maybe it wasn't the one that fans were wanting early in free agency, but Josh Jones coming over from Baltimore, formerly a 3rd-round pick for the Arizona Cardinals. Nick, he has started games at 3 different positions, and he's played every spot except center in his career. So at least from a versatility standpoint, you can understand why the value is up to $4.75 million, because that is a very valuable trait when you can play that many spots.
Let's just say if the last 2 years of his season, Pro Football Focus grades were my actual grades in high school, I would have been sent to a boys only boarding school and punished for eternity by my parents for those poor grades. I mean, it's been bad. you pretty much highlighted the only positive I can say is versatility. He's got NFL snaps at every single offensive line position except for center. You want a guy of versatility, D-. If this is the only signing they've made along the offensive line, if they go into the summer with Josh Jones as the only addition minus the draft and the offensive line, I am going to throw things out my second story window. So Josh Jones, D- for now. It's just basically the grade of that's the only one they've done so far. Very disappointing. D for disappointing.
Look, I understand your argument. I'm going to give a C+, and here's why. Because I'm looking at it for what it is. You needed a swing tackle. Stone Forsythe was one of the worst swing tackles in the NFL the last couple of years. You let him go. George Fant missed all but 2 games last year and is a much older player. You let him go. They needed to have a guy that could be that swing tackle that has played both positions. And look, when Jones was playing tackle in Arizona for 2 years as a starter, he had respectable numbers. They weren't terrible. And I know the last couple of years, grades have said one thing about him, but he's only 27. There still may be some untapped potential there. I liked him at Houston. I'm looking at this for what it is. They did not sign him as a starter, and I get your argument. They need to go out and get somebody. I completely agree with that. But I'm not going to lower his grade down into the low Ds for that reason when that's not really necessarily on him. Let's go to the 2 signings that were free agents of the Seahawks that they brought in. And Nick, I just want to hear your thoughts on these real quick. We've got Ernest Jones, 3 years, $33 million. And we've also got Jarran Reed, 3 years, $22 million. The only 2 free agents that Seattle had that they have brought back, and maybe the only ones that they bring back at this point.
I'll make this really quick, Corbin. They both get A's. They just any deal to bring back Ernest Jones was going to be an A for me. Then they get him at a Logan Wilson type deal, very, very reasonable deal. Clearly, defense changed a lot when he came to town. Jarran Reed clearly plays his best ball in Seattle. Very, very simply, I wanted those 2 back. They came back at reasonable deals. A's all around.
Ernest Jones gets an A+. I don't usually give those, but look, Nick Bolton signed, and Nick Bolton's got almost identical stats to Ernest Jones over the last 4 years. If you look at their stat lines, it's insane. And they're a couple months apart in age. Ernest Jones gets $11 million. Bolton got $15 million per year. John Schneider made a killing there because I think Ernest Jones is every bit as good as Nick Bolton. So that was a fantastic value. B+ for Jarran Reed. Only reason I didn't go in the A is just because of the length of the deal, but I understand that guaranteed money is going to make this probably a 1 or 2 year contract. I get that, but I like the value for the player and what he brings to the locker room. And our last one, I don't want to let's make it a last but not least type thing because he does make a lot of big plays. That is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 1 year up to $5.5 million. We don't know the guarantees just yet. I'll let you give your grade. Look, I gave this one a rock solid B. And my rationale is I don't think Seattle's looking for him to replace DK Metcalf. They're certainly not looking for him to do that. But can he replace one part of Metcalf's game, the deep ball? Heck yeah, he can. 13 of his 20 career touchdowns, 20-plus yards. 33% of his career catches 20-plus yards to the air. He's a feast or famine guy, but that one trick he has, he had 4 touchdowns in New Orleans in limited time last year. Klint Kubiak knows how to utilize him. So I have a feeling he's the field stretcher that they need as a 3 or 4. That's good value for the price they got.
To quote one of my favorite movies, Moneyball, you're going to replace DK Metcalf in the aggregate. And in the aggregate right now is Marquez Valdes-Scantling with that deep ball, that deep presence, that his presence alone, even if it turns out to be sometimes or some plays or some games a decoy, that could be really useful. I'm going to give it a solid B as well. Fairly low risk. Gives you that size dynamic and that deep threat dynamic that you do lose with DK Metcalf, obviously the different players. But yeah, solid B there.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at NickLee51. It is baseball season, so be expecting plenty of Padres tweets coming your way. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back on Monday, will Cooper Kupp be a Seahawk? Will Tevin Jenkins be a Seahawk by Monday by the time we do our show? Who knows? We'll have the latest on free agency. And maybe we'll start looking back towards the draft a little bit as it inches closer. Make sure that you listen and enjoy your weekend. Go Hawks.